when I look at how ICF is evolving, we're starting to see more permission for that element in the competencies, definitely in the renewed competencies as opposed to the old ones, but the space to provide advice and guidance. And I have a really strong point of view that a good coach does both. A really skillful coach knows exactly when to do either. So when I select coaches into our empanelment that have been paneled with us, that's one of the things I'm really looking for is, can they do both? Do they have that toolkit that they can make the offer? Hey, look, I've got a framework that might help you here. Would it be useful?
Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce, the podcast where we talk to extraordinary coaches and leaders to dive into the realms of leadership and coaching. We're your hosts, Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. So let's jump in with another guest and find out their answer to the question, what is your secret sauce? Welcome to Leadership, the Secret Sauce with coaches Dave Lipsky and Matt Dodson. Before we begin, a quick shout out to our forever sponsor, Character Matters Coaching and Consulting, where they believe that your character is the compass guiding you through life's journey. Whether you're facing personal or professional challenges, they are dedicated to helping you discover and strengthen the core values that define who you are. Dave, can you tell me who is on the podcast today?
We have Corinne today, and I am very excited to welcome her into the podcast. Corinne, Matt and I have this podcast to hang out with coaches and to talk with them. And we are always excited to have a coach come and talk to us, and also to put a little bit of international flair on today's episode. So Corinne is calling in from Singapore. We're very excited to have you on. And my first question is, on a scale from 1 to 10, what would your energy level be? 1 would being low, 10 would be high.
Well, I've listened to a number of your podcasts, and I noticed that everybody seems to rate high, which is totally understandable. We had a
Positive
massive
bias.
Yeah, absolutely right. Like, yay, we're here. We had a massive tropical storm here in Singapore last night. So it's 8 a.m. here in the morning, massive tropical storm, loads of electricity in the air. So I think it's just really amped me up. So I would certainly put myself up there, maybe an 8 or a 9. I'm pretty excited about our conversation today.
Very nice.
Round
And Matt,
number, Dave.
8,
Round number.
9, Matt,
Yeah.
round. No decimals, Matt. Come on. Where are you?
See, I was going to say 8.15, but I actually would say probably 8.5. That's actually pretty good. Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to give you this one. I'm going to come in at 8.36.
Okay.
I'm not really sure exactly why, but 836 just seemed like a good number for me.
Good.
Yeah, I can tell you both work for companies with a lot of engineers, right? Because you've got that 0.3, 0.2. Yeah.
Yeah, that whole statistical thing, it was graduate school that ruined me. But that's a whole other conversation. Corinne, as you, let's say you were taking a trip to visit a country like Korea, for example, just as an example, and somebody turns to you and says, Corinne, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
Well, first of all, I'm very boring on planes. I'm very British about this. I hate speaking to anybody on any form of transport. So they would absolutely have to be a fabulous human being. But let's say it was you or Matt, and we hadn't met, and you turned to me and you said that. So some of the things I'd say about myself is I'm a business psychologist. So I'm refer to myself as a business psychologist. I find that people get it a little bit more easily. And I would say that I really love to help people thrive at work. That's what I love. That's my passion. I'm British, originally from the UK. I've been here in Singapore for about 17 years. So again, that sort of really does inform my point of view. And I tell them a bit about the company that I work for, which is Organization Solutions, which is just a fab company that I've worked with for 8 years. And we're headquartered in Singapore, and we work with the most amazing leaders and organizations around the world, helping them sort of grow and build their leader and organization capability.
I so appreciate that. And I find the need to go off script and ask you one more question, which is, what is your favorite food?
In the world?
Yeah, in the world. If you had a choice of one food.
Okay. So When I was younger, I used to go a lot to a Spanish island called Lanzarote, which is an amazing volcanic island off of the coast of Africa. And they have something called calamari a la plancha, which is grilled squid. And it comes
Mm.
with these salted potatoes and this sauce called rojo verde or rojo. And it's just the most delicious combination of tastes and textures. It's simple, but it always reminds me of being on holiday with my
Mm.
family.
Matt, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave this podcast and get that food immediately.
I've
So it's
had
all
grilled
yours.
squid.
Thank you.
It's amazing. Yes. Yeah.
I do. That is actually, it is one of my favorite foods, grilled octopus and grilled squid. But I have not had it with the name that you use. So I think I need to find that island.
Yes, it's an amazing place. It's incredible. And it's really shown how evolution happens. When I started going there, oh my goodness, I was 19. So what's that? Just, a couple of years ago. It was so bare. They had had a volcanic eruption in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And it was so bare. It was just pure volcanic rock. When you look at it, it's like the surface of the moon. Now, if you come back to Lanzarote, you can see so much flora and fauna. And part of that is because it's been brought in. So it's been accelerated.
Mm.
But it's just changed. The landscape's changed so quickly. And it's just from a geological perspective, it's so fascinating. It really is. So it's definitely worth a visit. And the food's great.
Wow.
I like it, and actually the earth recovers, and I love the idea of recovery and sustainability and resilience.
Yeah.
And I'll kick in. I'm going to turn the first question over to Matt. I was going to ask it, but I feel like I used up too many questions to start, Matt. So,
Corinne, what is your secret sauce if you had to describe it?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for this question. It's been a really great process of self-exploration for me, actually. So I thought about it when you first asked me, Matt. I thought about it and I came up with a bunch of ideas, and I was sitting in this coffee shop and I was writing them all down. And I thought, hey, this is silly. Like, I should actually ask my coachees and ask them and get their
Mm.
view on what they would say. So I reached out to a number of them. I'm coaching some fabulous leaders at the moment. They're fantastically insightful. And they came up with these super helpful answers. And they were so lovely to read. I mean, it was just such an amazing way to ask for feedback. So genuinely objective and out of context. So I was able to read those things through, and it was just fabulous. So thank you. I loved that process. So I've landed on two things. You'll notice I'm a little greedy. When asked for one, I like to go for a couple. So I hope you'll indulge me. But the first one was really around experimentation. So I love to invite my coachees to experiment. So rather than post-coaching actions, I invite them to run post-coaching experiments. And in my mind, there's a really big difference. When you run an experiment, it allows you to step into the observer frame, and you can set the experiment, you can try something new, and then you can watch the outcome. So you learn and adapt, you can try it again. And why is this important? Well, I guess for me, what it does is it gives the leaders permission to just try. We work with leaders at all levels across industry. You both do as well. It's one of the things that I notice all the time is that they face this massive pressure to get things right. It has to be right. There's this pressure, either because they're just incredible human beings with this very high standard for themselves, and always have had, or they're working in a regulated industry, or their culture doesn't allow for mistakes. And so they often feel like there's just very little space to try new things. And what I've really noticed is if you ask them to step into the experimentation frame, it just kind of lets them off the hook. It gives them space to try, lets them put a growth mindset hat on, and it allows it to be fun. And I just think we miss fun out of the process so often. It's so interesting when I frame it up that way and I talk about experimentation. Often I can just see their bodies relax. It just kind of go, oh, okay. And sometimes what they'll say to me is, because the other person has a choice. And I'm like, yeah, you can try something. Like, you try and be more assertive, or you try and set that boundary, or, you experiment with a different way of interacting, and just watch what the other person do, watch how the system unfolds, what becomes possible. And they're like, yeah, because that person has a choice how they respond. Yes, absolutely. They get to choose and you get to watch. And, and I just love that. And I think it really resonates with leaders in Asia as well. So I've been here for 17 years. I absolutely adore it in Asia. The environment is just so generative. The things I've learned have just been spectacular. One of the big themes when I've been coaching leaders here is that the idea of face, keeping face is so important. The driver of avoiding shame is just, it's massive. It's a really big cultural element. So they really don't want to get it wrong, and often we're talking about coaching themes around that. Often my leaders are working at how do I engage with head office that might be in the US or might be in Europe? How am I speaking up? I've got their head of HR or their line on the or asking me to say, look, we just don't hear enough from them. We want to put them into a global role, but we really need them to find some voice in order to do that. And relationships are so critical. I mean, everywhere in the world, but especially here. So speaking up, it's counterintuitive because you don't want to mess up the relationship. And being able to set that in an experimentation frame just gives them a permission to try that out, to see what happens. And I say to them, look, if it's really stressful, put in a support system. Tell other people you're experimenting. Get the buy-in. Mitigate some of that risk. Get them involved in your success. And they're like, oh, okay, let's do that. So it just helps them, put that into perspective.
And your other one?
So my other one is the power of a reframe. And this came out really strongly from my coachees, and I hadn't really noticed that I do it, but I'm so happy that they mentioned it. So, just really taking what they've said, reflecting it back in a way that means that they can examine it from a different angle or see facets of the situation they haven't done before. So, sometimes you're asking a question, why, or what becomes possible if that didn't matter, or what's the worst. Or sometimes it's just the advantage of being outside the situation. So I had a client, he was stuck trying to please his boss, didn't understand what they really wanted. There was just this horrible miscommunication. There was this vicious cycle. We were heading towards a PIP. It was really stressful for him. And we realized that he was really super stuck because he was just concerned about his family and his responsibilities. And he hadn't even talked to his wife about it. And when we were talking about that in a completely different way. We've reframed it up. And he realized that he was really creating his own cage. That's what was happening. And I remember it just sits with me. I wanted to bring this example because I was thinking about what's an example of where I've done a reframe. And this one sticks out because the next coaching session I came in and I was like, hey, what's better since last time? Normally my opening question. And then, and he said, hey, I had this amazing conversation with my wife. And he looked like a different human being. It was just like this weight had been lifted. He said, I had this conversation with my wife. She said, hey, if it doesn't work out, don't stress. We can manage the responsibilities. I can step up in my job. We can manage it out. I've noticed you've been stressed. And he'd framed his challenge in a completely different way. And it was really interesting because it unlocked his ability to take more risks, speak up when he needed at work, which is what his boss had wanted. She'd wanted him to really be a bit more innovative. He worked in compliance and be a bit more innovative, take risks, work with people. And he ended up getting promoted. And it was just this really beautiful way of thinking about the situation in a different way. So that sort of element of reframe is important. That's been around for me for a while. I mean, I'm sure you're both super familiar with the work of Richard Heifetz, the idea of adaptive leadership. And that was really the start of that for me, how, when you frame the right challenge and you work on the right thing, then the effort flows. And then you're really able to face that and address that specific challenge itself.
What's the connection with reframe and experimentation for you in your coaching?
Yeah, I mean, I know that's really interesting. As I was just running through that, I thought, my goodness, the connection's really tight because the idea of experiment in itself is a reframe. And, when you are thinking about how do you step into that observer role, you're changing your identity and you're shifting who you are in the process. So you're literally reframing, you're taking a picture from a different space. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, if experimentation and reframe, and your clients told you about it. So, but when did you notice it first in yourself?
I think that I'm a scientist, right? So from an experimentation point of view, I I love a good experiment, and I actually wanted to be a molecular biologist. So when I started university, I decided I wanted to be in molecular biology. But I'm a bit like Ron Weasley. So if everybody else's potion is green, mine is blue, and it that didn't really bode well for a science where you basically combine clear liquids. So I thought, my goodness, I don't know what's going to happen if I'm a molecular biologist. So instead of messing with that, I decided to mess with people's minds. And I took a course in psychology, and I just loved it. And so I ended up, where I am as a business psychologist, and I adore it. But being evidence-based is something that's really important. It informs my point of view when I think about the way that we serve our clients, when I think about what's important to us in our values as an organization, and my values as a professional practitioner. Being evidence-based, ensuring that we provide solutions that actually work, or at least we've got theory and evidence behind, is super important. So that idea of experimentation, and we could get into the philosophy of experimentation. I did another course in history and philosophy of science, which completely left field, but honestly, I think every scientist should do. It was so fabulous, and the whole philosophy of experimentation. But certainly, so that element of it has always been there. That idea of take an experiment, try things out, be a scientist. I also, when my coaching started in assessment feedback, and I noticed that's been a bit of a theme with some of the other coaches that you've had on the podcast. And I think that where I've been testing theories with assessment feedback, you're often doing a lot of theory testing, saying, okay, well, these are the things that I see, and how do I test that theory? Does that resonate for the individual you're working with? And I love that. I love the insight and the testing the theories. And I just saw how that experimentation frame really unlocked the opportunity for my clients. For Reframe, I'm not really sure. I didn't really realize that was part of my secret sauce until my coaches mentioned it. So I've been reflecting on it. But, if I think about the challenges that, all leaders are facing right now, and the ones that I see, I run our coaching business at OS, and so I get to work with about 300 coaches around the world. And so I get to see the trends that they're working with, and what the leaders are asking us to support them on, and then what the coaches are. And they're all adaptive challenges, speed and type of change, resilience, cross-cultural, AI, the big one, massive, massive adaptive challenges. And so thinking and how you're reframing their strategic needs is there all the time. This is a bit of an aside, but I think our industry, coaching right now, is facing a huge adaptive challenge. Huge. Fascinating, so exciting. I'm super excited about it. I think there's so many possibilities that the blend of technology and humans will allow. A whole role, a whole identity of coaches is going through an adaptive challenge. So I suppose that's a big, there's a big context of that then maybe informs my approach as well.
I was thinking, I so appreciate what you said before about your client bringing in the pressure of talking about it at home, and I'm trying to picture, how would I see you inviting that in, creating that space for that client to share that?
That's a great question, Dave. I don't know about your practice as coaches, but I think that just as the trust builds and you show a little bit of vulnerability yourself, then you can just drop those levels. I work with a lot of, and I'm sure you guys do too, but I work with a lot of male leaders who have come from either Confucian cultures of what a good leader looks like, or a more kind of very traditional cultures of different kinds, but of a similar theme. This is what the man does, and this is how he supports his family, and this is what I do to be successful at work, and I've got to be the leader from the front. And they can't, they're really struggling to work out what the transition into good leadership looks like now, because it's so different. They've got to be as well as do. They need to engage and motivate their team. They're going through, from an adult development point of view, they're often in that 40s, 50s kind of transition. So they're just working out their next iteration of who they are. Their body chemistry is changing. So I think just being respectful of that and giving them the space, but also allowing that to unfold. If you can build the credibility up front, you have to have the credibility, especially in this, in the parts of the world that I work in. If you don't bring the credibility, then you're shot. But as long as you've got that credibility, then you've built the alliance and the trust. I see them opening up a little bit more. And once they realize that you are truly on their side and like you're 100% there to help them be the best that they can be, then you can get there sometimes. There have been coaches that I've worked with who I haven't really been able to get underneath the surface, and that's okay. We coach at the sort of head level and we talk about strategic actions and we do a lot of things that are going to help their leadership progress in terms of strategies on the job. But sometimes you get that drop and everything shifts.
Yeah, it sounds like that one of the big things is like the breaking down between the work and the home. Like that means as a coach, okay, there's a lot more freedom. I can ask more questions. I can connect what they do, who they are at work with who they are at home, and see if there's any inconsistency or maybe even ways they want to be that they're at home that they wish they could be at work, but they don't. They've got their armor up, as Brene Brown would say, and they don't want to actually let that down. So
yeah, I think that's a great point, Matt.
Yeah.
Is there like, do you experience a cultural difference in asking for help?
I'd like to say yes, but I think everybody's really bad at asking for help. So I think it's a big theme, and I do coach people from all sorts of parts of the world. I would say sort of it's definitely over the past few years at least, it's definitely been sort of the majority of people India East. But certainly within that, I've had Western leaders who have been in this part of the world. So yes, I think this idea of shame and not being good enough is very deeply held. And so to try and get over that, you need to sort of talk about help in a different way. On the flip side, and I mean, I'm sure you guys will notice this from the collectivist culture point of view, there is a sort of a different orientation about how we are successful together. So if you can kind of tap into that opportunity and how you're helping others and others are helping you, then it gives different strategies at work in order for them to be able to feel that they are able to ask for help or offer help, and then see the reciprocity come back in terms of the help from others. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Dave?
It does, and I'm always fascinated with the cultural differences. I work for a Japanese organization, a Korean organization, and I do see some of them, and at the same time, I think I've been in the water long enough that I don't notice the water. Sometimes I have to ask. The other thing, you said you talk with like 300 coaches. I am always fascinated with what do coaches need? Like how should we be helping coaches be able to do the things they need to do?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great question. So I think there's three things that come to mind. The first one is coaches need community. So one thing I really notice about our empaneled coach network is that they want to be connected, not just to us, but to other coaches. They want to learn from one another. We have quite a lot who are individual practitioners or are in small groups, and they're empaneled with us and work with and through us. So they want that connection. They want to learn. They want to feel like they're part of the community. So that would be the first thing. I think the second thing that they need is an understanding or an engagement in what the future of coaching looks like. And I see a really big difference in coaches. One, which is some are like all in, right? They're like, let's go digital. I want to add a bot. I want to be a bot. I want to kind of really kind of go for this. We're talking about scaling personalized development. I want to be in it 100%, right? You got those. And then you've got on the other extreme, you have the coaches who are saying, hey, this is really not me. Like I did not get into this to have to start any kind of tech. I've got some delightful coaches who I adore, who are amazing coaches and can't really, when I get a Word document from them, it's wonky. If we have to get them on a Zoom call, we're working hard, and they're amazing coaches and I love them and want them as part of my network. But if I think about their readiness for digitalization and their acceptance, and it's not so much an age thing either, it's just their orientation. And I feel like there's a space for everything. My daughter, who's 13, she said to me, can I have a CD player? I was like, all right, love. Like, yeah, it's all coming back because it's all this retro stuff. And in coaching, I do think that there is a growing desire from clients to say, hey, I don't want anything that touches any digital pieces. I really want somebody who's just human interaction. Lots of organizations, even that we work with, who are struggling to integrate tech because of the restrictions in their organizations becoming more and more intense, are saying to me, can we just do something that just takes tech out and we can just go? So there's certainly a space for that. But I think coaches need to be realistic about the future space in which we will be successful. Team coaching, systems coaching, complex issue coaching, and how do we utilize technology like AI in order to augment. And so helping them do that, I think that's the second thing that coaches really need. And then, the third thing that I think that is useful for coaches is really just a sense for what are some of the big challenges that organizations and leaders are facing. So we've talked about like AI, but there's this idea that the space and type of change is just going so fast. That the unit of success is becoming collective, the team effectiveness idea. Dave, you mentioned it, but from your work all around the world, Matt, your work all around the world, this idea of cross-cultural fluency for leaders, the ability to be resilient and adaptable, and helping them build up their toolkit in terms of blending both questions. We focus a lot on this OS, but the blend between questions, great questions, with advice and guidance and frameworks and offers that everybody being coached really does want. They want that blend of those two things. So helping coaches build up their personal toolkit as well.
That's it. You know what? That's really kind of fascinating. One of our previous guests just talked about, we have sometimes in our mind like this, oh, we're supposed to actually sort of work within the framework, work within the competencies of coaching. But the higher and higher you go, the more they're asking for, can you give me some advice? Can you really, it's really actually kind of, it's shifting things. Like, I think you have to kind of know or live or be those competencies to know when you could say, hey, can I offer you something? It's a little bit, because I think I want that as a leader. I want the coach to kind of step out of the coach role and just tell me, like, see something that I'm not seeing, because obviously I have blindness, and I'm not going to get out of it without a certain amount of blindness or showing up with a bunch of people that maybe work for me and not know, like, hey, you're just not seeing it all.
Yeah. I agree with that. I have a really strong point of view on this. And actually, when I look at how ICF is evolving, we're starting to see more permission for that element in the competencies, definitely in the renewed competencies as opposed to the old ones, but the space to provide advice and guidance. And I have a really strong point of view that a good coach does both. A really skillful coach knows exactly when to do either. So when I select coaches into our empanelment that empaneled with us, that's one of the things I'm really looking for is, can they do both? Do they have that toolkit that they can make the offer, hey, look, I've got a framework that might help you here. Would it be useful? Or, I noticed this, or there's this example from this leader that I worked with previously, and I think that would be useful. Can I share? Or when it's the powerful question that they need, they don't want to step into advisory role, they need to step back and ask the question, well, why not? Or whatever that looks like. And so that art and science of coaching, that art of being able to select the right intervention, defines to me a good coach. But to be able to blend those two is what the leaders need. 100%, that's what they need. And if we think about the coaching alliance, which we know is one of the big drivers of whether a coaching relationship is successful or not, credibility is in there. I mean, it's a classic key part of building that alliance. And in my experience, it's very difficult to see how you build that credibility with an incredible leader. We work with intelligent, incredible people leading huge parts of huge businesses, or entrepreneurs with these amazing ideas, scaling up these things. It's our privilege to be able to work with people like that. They're smart. And so to be able to bring that insight or something different for them, both what we can help them uncover, that safe space, so they know that we're different, but also that we can provide those offers. I think it's critical. It's key for us.
Yeah, one of the just coaching a leader the other day, and she actually parroted back to me, or just said, "Hey, look, you said this one thing, and I just keep using it over and over again." And it was just an advice phrase, right?
Mm, mm,
You could either be, a victim or a volunteer, or a prisoner,
love it.
or, a participant. And she's like, I've just kept going over that over and over again in whatever the organizational transformation that she was experiencing. Yeah, it's,
I love that. Isn't that the most beautiful thing
yeah,
about being a coach? Like, there's literally nothing better for me. Maybe it's just my need for external validation. Who knows? But, there is literally nothing better than when someone says, I was thinking about that thing you said last time. And I took it and I did this with it. And it gave me permission to try this. And this is what happened. I'm like, oh, I'm so happy. That really gives me a buzz. Because they've taken it, they've made it their own. It's no longer yours. They've taken it, they've made it work for them, they've adapted it, but it has helped them just shift that perspective a little and change their behavior more easily.
What do you want from a coach, Corinne?
yeah.
What do I want from a coach? Oh, I'm really picky. I've had a few coaches. I've had some fabulous coaches. So for me, some of the strengths are the blend of insight and advice, like what I described. Like, I want them to ask me questions that pull me up on my haunches. I want them to share frameworks and ideas that make me go, oh, that's super interesting. I hadn't really heard about that. I mean, I had a coach once actually, and I was complaining, and it really was complaining. I was complaining about this work relationship. It was tricky. It wasn't going in the right way. I didn't know what to do. And my coach said, have you talked to them about it? And I went, no. Oh, that's maybe I should do that. It was this massive aha, but it was so simple, but it really pulled me up on my haunches. I hadn't thought about it at all. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, keeping this PC, someone that calls me out on my BS, that is really important to me. I have to have someone who does that. This is a great, I don't know, I'm sure you're familiar. There's an American comedian called Bob Newhart. He recently died. He's not someone I'm familiar with, but he did this amazing sketch. It's a therapy sketch. I don't know whether you've ever seen it, but I would watch it. And he's a therapist, and he has somebody in his come in, and he's like, okay, well,
Stop
I'm
it.
going to charge you. Yeah,
Just
I'm going to
stop it.
charge you for the first minute. And she's like, what? And she comes in and he goes, right, okay. And she tells him she's scared of being trapped underground. And he goes, well, just stop it. And she's like, what? He's like, yeah, just stop it. And I just love it. I use it so often. And it's just the most fabulous sketch. And I think sometimes I just need someone to just go, stop it. Just stop. Oh, okay. I'll just stop doing that then. So,
That's so good. The modern version of that is on shrinking. It's a thing on Apple
yeah,
TV. Have you seen that?
I have.
Because that's the opportunity to provide client advice. Interesting how it turned out the second time. Just stop it.
Yeah, just stop it.
Leave that person.
Yeah, I know. I love that. That's so true. You're right. It's a similar theme. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And sometimes that's what you need, and that's sometimes what I need. I like something that gets me out of my head. So I'm super good at rationalizing and analyzing. I live in my head. I've had to really work hard to work out that the rest of this body that I have isn't just for carrying my head around. So I do integrate into my coaching I'm a scientist, but I have some woo. Like I do somatic coaching. I do emotional freedom technique. I'm equine facilitated therapy trained. So I do quite a lot that's sort of body intelligence as well. And again, that's a great experiment. Like I'll have a leader in their office. And I'm like, hey, do you want to do something kind of crazy? We're like, okay, let's try it, and you're getting them out of their head and you're getting them into their body. And that's important to me because I'll sit there and I'll be listening to my coach and I'll be like, oh, you are using this technique now. And this is the methodology you're using. And when I do that, I'm like, hey, Corinne, you're disconnecting, like reconnect with the purpose of being here. So I need someone that has some of that, keeps me accountable. Something super easy. Actually, I was thinking about that as the idea of a good maxim. I love a good maxim, Matt, just like you. Like, I think they're great for human behavior change. I call them the post-it notes on your screen, right? What are the things that you've got? They're great for that. They're great, like, if I don't want to put my running shoes. Oh, Dave's got his posts. I love that. It's not just work, but it's, if I get up in the morning, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go running. Like, what are those maxims? And I have two favorite ones. And then I want to know what your favorite ones are as well. Because my two favorite are choose your hard, which is like everything in the world is hard. It's hard to get up in the morning and go to work, but it's hard to be unemployed. It's hard to go, lift weights, but it's hard to be old and weak. It's like, you're just choosing your hard, but you get to choose your hard. And the other one that is just a perennial is progress, not perfection. And those, I think, are my two favorite. What about you guys? What are your favorites?
Dave, you go ahead. I think I've got one.
I find myself saying, and I do a lot of teaching of coaches, so I find myself saying, choose connection over content every time.
I love that.
Mine is always relationship is the foundation for accomplishment, and then it might be better that way.
Oh,
yeah, it might be better.
That was deep. Yeah, that was deep. Drop the mic.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I like that one, Matt.
Because I resist rather than resisting. I'm just like, there was a mentor that one time said that, you know what? It may be better that way. I'm like, why did you say that? Anyway.
I love that. That's great.
Corinne, what 3 resources would you recommend besides the Bob Newhart video, which I will put in the resources so people can actually watch that,
Thank
or
you.
we'll bury them alive in a box once they see that. They will understand. What would you recommend?
So I've chosen a few. They're not specifically coaching resources, but it ties back to the themes we were talking about earlier, Dave, which is what I think coaches need right now. And I think they need things that are useful for when they're discussing approaches and strategies with business leaders and thinking about our own resources. So I have a number of them. And again, I'm greedy, so I might have more than 3. I'm just saying. So my first resource is really, it's not a specific resource, but it's the idea of staying open to learning about the future of work from those that are creating it. Now, I'm really lucky. I have a stepdaughter who is in her mid-20s, and she's building this really successful career as a content creator and influencer. 2 things that were never, I can't even imagine what that looks like. It's not been something that's been part of my idea of what work looks like, but she's teaching me about the future of work, what it looks like, this new whole career area. And I find that incredibly valuable to how I think about myself as a psychologist, a scientist, and a coach. The second thing is the ICF has some really great thought leadership resources on their future of work, on future of coaching. I'll send you the links, but they really are fabulous and they're open to everyone. You don't have to be a member to look at them. And they cover a number of different topics. So as a start place for both the future of our industry, but also the future of work in the world, they're a great place. I think all coaches should have something where they go to look at tech and AI trends. So something like CB Insights, which is the one that I tend to use, but there are many others. They often tied to PE or analysts, but just something where you're tapping into, okay, where is this crazy world of AI tech trends going? And then the Visual Capitalist. I love the Visual Capitalist because it is such a great way to access all these ideas about the world around us. And I use it a surprising amount in my coaching and in my thinking about what's important for our business organization solutions as well. I've got commercial responsibility for building a business. So I really need to think about what's happening in our industry and what are our clients' needs and what do we need to be thinking about in terms of building that business and continuing to grow. And so just some of those visual frames actually spark for me quite a lot. That's really interesting. Let me think about that. How does that tie into this leader I'm coaching in logistics, for example? And then, of course, I have to mention Organization Solutions newsletter, which comes out regularly, and you can subscribe to, which is called Grow, which is fantastic. And we put out lots of great content in that.
Nice.
I want to subscribe.
Yeah, go ahead. You can go to our website and subscribe.
And aren't they opening up an office in New York, Corinne? Is that happening?
There will be, yes, indeed. We will have a US-based physical office as of the beginning of December, I think.
Yeah. Welcome to New York.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dave, what's your reflection?
My reflection is I just want to start off. I love your energy, Corinne. I feel like I want to talk with you and I want to explore. I do feel like you're welcoming experimentation. And I think the reflection is, in my son is a biomedical engineer, and it's all about judgment. It's being able to judge things. And in talking with you, even though you have the science background, I feel no judgment with experimentation. And I think the power of that combination is part of what you said about, like, how do you build trust? Like, how does somebody from the other side of the table decide that they're at a point where they're actually going to disclose they need to have a conversation with their wife? That I find fascinating, and I want to continue to explore. And I really appreciate you highlighting the importance of that.
Thank you.
I think also, you know what, mine was the insight was the idea that once you've reached sort of beyond the work life, you've really built a sense of trust with your client. Like, all of a sudden, if I can actually talk about those things that are very personal, because they don't stop when I get to the office door, right? I bring them with me. Like, as someone one time I said, you're you 24 hours a day. So why would you think that all of your challenges at home would not affect when you get into an office? Like, they don't go away. And I think as a coach, that's kind of like an indicator, like, hey, you've built up a relationship that has a trust part to it, that I'd be willing to tell you about some of the challenges I'm facing at home that are affecting my work life. And I could experiment and say, well, maybe if I can do it at home, or if I can do it at work, I could probably try it at home, because I'm sure it's probably there somewhere. I don't have to look very hard. So that was my thought. I like the thought about maxims, and of course, an experimentation. Those are, yeah.
And I'm going to add one more thing. I'm taking choose your hard. Actually, just reminded me of reflection across episodes. Is like dukkha, like the different things that life is hard, and you have to face up to that as a coach. And I really like the idea of welcoming that in and then coaching to that.
Yeah. I love that, Dave. And as you talk about that, I think, and then there's the paradoxical other side of it, which is a phrase I use all the time, which I quote Mary Poppins, right? Find the fun and snap the job's a game. So, you've got that. I 100% like that. Choose your hard. You've got to do it. You kind of got to lean into it and make it happen. And we've got to find a space for making this fun. This is what we do, like, both as coaches and as people at work. Like, we do that. We spend so much time in this. Like, how can we use the power of fun and enjoyment in order to, make things easier and flow?
I love, by the way, just to be clear, Matt, when she uses a Mary Poppins quote, she's so much more credible than you. I just want to put that out.
Yeah. Oh my goodness! If you're saying that I'm in any way like Julie Andrews, you're like literally my favorite person on earth.
It would be like mine is the Dick Van Dyke bad Cockney accent, Dave, which I watched way too often as a kid. So yeah,
I love it.
Corinne, how could someone get a hold of you? Like, what's the best way for someone to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways. I mean, you can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. And we can drop my LinkedIn profile into the notes. That would be lovely. I'm really excited to meet new other coaches and other people listening to this podcast. And then through our organization solutions, if you're interested in getting more information about OS, then the easiest thing to do is to head to our website and take a look, and you can connect to us. There's contact details on the website as well.
Great. Thanks. Dave?
I want to close by referencing our never-ending sponsor, our always sponsor. I forgot how we said it before, Matt. Are you feeling stuck or
Forever
overwhelmed?
sponsor. Yeah.
Forever sponsor. Are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed? Character Matters Coaching and Consulting provides leadership coaching and consulting to empower you to help you with the obstacles and reach your full potential. Visit charactermatterscoaching.com to learn more about their transformative coaching and how to get connected to Matt for your organization and to learn the next best Mary Poppins quote.
And there's a snap. And the job is done. Thank you, Corinne. We really appreciate you being on the podcast. It's a blast.
Thank you so much. It's been such fun and a fabulous way for me to start my weekend.
Thanks for listening. If you love this podcast, please share it with another coach or leader. Make sure you go to the show notes to get all the resources from today's episode.